Money as far as getting my appointments. I do have to get very, 90-day pre-close just like a physician. I don't have
I'm just really grateful that everybody's come here today, especially the incredible group of activists behind me. I want to thank everyone, the speakers that you'll hear from shortly, who've endorsed this important bill. I'm very excited that an organization that's been giving me advice since I was a city council person, the Drug Policy Alliance, is here. Law Enforcement Against Prohibition is here. The NAACP, New Jersey State Conference is here, and many other organizations that are represented behind me, as well as elected leaders at every level of government standing here with me. And of course, state senator. I almost said my state senator, but you don't represent me.
I'll be your state senator.
I don't want to get in trouble with my two state senators that represent Newark. But I really want to thank you, Nick, for your national leadership on this issue. You can give him an applaud now.
Well deserved.
And then ACLU, LEAP, Normal, I can keep going on and on and on. Hosting us, of course, is Senator Scutari. His bill that he sponsored, the marijuana legalization bill for the state of New Jersey, is in the New Jersey legislature. And again, his leadership inspires me, and I'm just grateful that he's willing to stand beside me in the heat, literally and figuratively. So this is a very personal issue for me, I want you to know. And I see it every day. I'm the only United States senator, I think in the history of our country, that lives in an inner city community that is overwhelmingly, predominantly Black and Latino. It is a rich community in terms of spirit and character, the goodness of the people, but it is a low-income community. The exact census tract data shows that my census tract has about a $14,000 per household income. And I say it's personal because I see firsthand in our nation how we have very different sets of laws for different communities. That the war on drugs is a war on people, but particularly it's been a war on low-income people and disproportionately a war on minorities. We know in the United States of America there is no difference in drug use between blacks, whites, and Latinos. But if you're Latino in the United States of America, you're about twice as likely to be arrested for drug use than if you're white. If you're black, you're almost 4 times as likely to be arrested if you are African American than if you are white. This drug war has done so much to destroy, undermine, sabotage families, communities, neighborhoods, cities. It has hurt our country, and it's actually made us less safe. In the same way that prohibition on alcohol made us less safe, drove violence and gangs, we see now that prohibition on marijuana is having the same effect. I saw firsthand as a college student that drug use was widespread, that folks from communities that are privileged, in fact, you didn't see people getting stopped and frisked on the way home from fraternity parties. You didn't see the FBI setting up sting operations on dorms, on college campuses, where many of us know you can get your Adderall, your ecstasy, your marijuana, and the like. In Congress right now, there are people who serve in the Senate and the House and their staff members who readily admit their use of drugs, that they flaunted drug laws, often with cavalierly, often with bravado. But for that teenager in my neighborhood who gets caught at 17 years old and gets that arrest record, it destroys their lives. They now are carrying a criminal conviction on their record, and what's happening to them? Well, they can't get Pell Grants, they can't get business licenses, have a hard time getting a job. It constricts their ability to have economic success for doing things in terms of criminality that are less severe than 2 of the last 3 presidents admitted to doing in doing harsher drugs. And so here we are in the United States of America where we really do not have equal justice under the law. Here we have in the United States of America, where we don't have liberty and justice for all, where we have criminalized communities based upon their socioeconomic status, not amongst any higher rates of law being, and devastated those communities economically. And so it's for these reasons and more that I have decided on the federal level to introduce this legislation. Now, I want to take a moment just to describe this legislation, the Marijuana Justice Act. It seeks to not only deschedule marijuana on the federal level, making marijuana a legal substance, but it also does more than that. It deals with the failed policies that disproportionately, unfairly have impacted low-income communities and communities of color. So it ends the federal prohibition on marijuana. It incentivizes states through federal funds to change their marijuana laws if those laws are shown to have a disproportionate impact on low-income individuals and people of color. And it automatically expunges federal marijuana use and possession crimes and allows people who are currently serving time for marijuana use or possession to petition the court for resentencing. And finally, and very importantly, it creates a community reinvestment fund to reinvest in those communities that have been impacted and even devastated from decades of the failed war on drugs. And so I want to say that we know here in New Jersey the data that is stunning. And this is one of the reasons why I know the good senator has acted. We know that in New Jersey, every 22 minutes, someone is arrested for marijuana possession. We know that New Jersey makes more than 21,000 marijuana possession arrests every year. And that we know from an ACLU study that there have been 8 million marijuana arrests between 2001 and 2010, and 88% of those arrests were just for marijuana possession. And knowing all of this, I want to tell you from another personal perspective. I was tired to see, as mayor of Newark, how I couldn't get resources to keep my community as safe as I would like to. In fact, we in the United States of America, we have de-invested in local police departments dramatically, cutting funding for local police offices by more than 70%, but increasing the funding for prisons, which are filled overwhelmingly with nonviolent drug offenders, increasing that funding nearly 50%. We are taking precious police resources and making them focused on the drug war as opposed to what is necessary, but having those precious resources being used to invest in public safety. And what do we know from states that have already legalized marijuana? Well, one, we're seeing preliminary data that they're seeing opioid-related overdose deaths go down. I talked to a doctor recently who talked about just the fact that people struggling with opioid addiction, that's helping them wean off of the drug. We've seen violent crime go down, and we've seen in cash-strapped states a new source of revenue, like we see from alcohol and other so-called sin taxes, a new source of revenue that can be used to invest in education, that can be used to deal with the disease of addiction, as we see here in New Jersey, not having the resources even for those people who are struggling with opioid addiction to get them residential beds. We know that this is common sense legislation. We know that this is legislation that focuses on racial justice and economic justice. And we know that this is legislation that can help us make us stronger and safer. I want to end with just the commentary I got in Wildwood, New Jersey last week from veterans who begged me to help do something about the over-criminalization of veterans in America. And here we have a country that is making our veterans, people who are struggling with post-traumatic stress, people who are struggling with depression, who often their only hope is their access to marijuana to treat these illnesses. And here we are criminalizing them for doing what's necessary to stabilize their lives as a result of this service. This is not who we are as a country. We are better than this. And I want to thank everyone who's joined with me to stand for this legislation. To hope that we can have a beginning now in this country of righting the wrongs, of ending this drug war, which is not a war on drugs, but a war on people and for ending the injustices that have been heaped upon low-income Americans and disproportionately among Americans of color. I want to now bring to the podium a man that I've already talked about, so I won't go on much longer. It is hot. But I just want to say that the work that Senator Scutari is doing is the work of a champion, is work that's sorely needed, and I'm just grateful that he'd be here today to stand and talk about his work and my legislation. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
First, I just want to thank Senator Booker. I mean, it's about time that someone with his intellect would step forward and realize that what we've been doing for over 80 years just simply is not working. For every single type of an avenue, if you're interested in, legalizing of marijuana makes total sense. We've been doing the same thing for 80 years and it simply isn't working. We've overcrowded our jobs, we've overcrowded our jails, we've overtaxed our police resources, and for what? Why have we done it? Nothing has changed. In fact, we've seen an opioid crisis go through the roof because we continue to police marijuana instead of the killer drug that lies within opioids. From an economic standpoint, the job creation and the job growth that we've seen in Colorado has been through the roof. Over 39,000 licensed new jobs created directly from marijuana legalization. The state tax revenue that New Jersey would realize is in the hundreds of millions of dollars, somewhere between $300 and $500 million in state direct taxation, not to mention local amounts of money that can be excised in order to influence their allowing the siting of marijuana facilities as well. From every different angle, it makes total sense. And the disparity of which these drugs are enforced is absolutely astounding. In fact, it could be akin almost to voter suppression. This is the reason, one of the reasons I just recently came up with that why we can't seem to roll back marijuana laws. Because perhaps someone thinks that these same voters may lean Democratic. I don't want to make it a Democrat or a Republican issue. This is a people issue.
That's right.
This is a people issue. I mean, marijuana was legalized for the large majority of this country's history. The problem is over the last 80 years it's been illegal and people have just forgotten that it was legal for all those years that this country was being formulated. In the 1700s, in the 1800s, in the early part of the 1900s, marijuana was a completely illegal substance. Since its criminalization, we have done nothing but stuff our jails with nonviolent offenders, destroyed the futures of people that unfortunately happen to be caught, and wrecked their opportunity for colleges and for a job. I mean, how many of our last presidents have admitted that they've smoked marijuana? They just happen to not get caught. Had they gotten caught, they probably wouldn't be president. How many people have we ruined the lives and the opportunities that they haven't had? They're countless. So the first thing I want to say and the last thing I want to say is thank you so much to Senator Cory Booker for having the forethought of introducing this type of legislation because it's a wonderful piece of legislation. I'm looking forward to working with him. I've told people many times my legislation is a continued work in progress. We want to get this ready for a Murphy administration next year. I want to continue to work with Senator Booker and making sure that these two things are congruous and work together with him. And I appreciate him picking Linden to help kick off his crusade for this. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I didn't give enough thanks to the city of Linden. This is a tremendous community, to the mayor and the elected leadership here. I give my gratitude. I now want to bring on somebody who's been a hero for me, again, representing an organization that's been informing my policy stances since I was a city council person. But this young lady has been a champion and a friend who's worked with me on a number of issues about the war on drugs. I bring forward the head really the New Jersey State Director of the Drug Policy Alliance, Roseanne Scotti. Thank you, Roseanne.
Senator Booker's legislation sends a clarion call on righting the injustice that has been marijuana prohibition at the federal level. But it won't just impact the federal level. This will be noted by states around the country, by elected officials around the country who perhaps haven't quite gotten to the point where they want to be public about their support for marijuana legalization. As Senator Booker said, African Americans are 4 times as likely to be arrested for marijuana possession as whites, even though both groups use marijuana at the same levels. The data we have shows similar disparities among Latinos. any marijuana legalization at the federal or the state level must address past harms to communities of color.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Senator Booker's legislation goes a long way towards doing that. At Drug Policy Alliance, we support marijuana legalization, and we are joined by 60% of Americans who also support marijuana legalization. We're taking a huge step today. I believe today will go down in history as a tipping point on this issue, and this issue hitting the mainstream in the way it never has before. We thank Senator Booker for introducing the Marijuana Justice Act, and we're going to do everything we can to work to make sure this legislation moves, if not in the immediate future, definitely in the not too distant future, because this is an issue whose time has come. Thank you.
All right, it is so important to have the voice of law enforcement. I was happy to see Hector Corchado here, who's a Newark cop. I will always see that, even though Newark leadership, I should say, detective. It is amazing to me that when I first started working with police officers in the field, literally at night, police officers just not believing in the harshness of the penalties that people were facing for possession. And I don't mean to out many of our law enforcement officers, but to have men and women sit with me in the cars telling me about their own use of marijuana and that they were now arresting people for that. The hypocrisy was too much for even them to bear. And so I'm very grateful to bring up retired Lieutenant Nicholas Bucci. He's a member of Law Enforcement Action Partnership. Nicholas, please come forward. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Dominic Nicholas Bucci. I spent 25 years as a state trooper, and on behalf of Law Enforcement Action Partnership, LEAP, a nonprofit group of police, judges, prosecutors, and other law enforcement professionals, we use our expertise to advance criminal justice and drug policy solutions that improve public safety. I'm here today to announce the endorsement of Senator Cory Booker's Marijuana Justice Act. I thank Senator and his staff for their efforts regarding such a critical issue, one that touches millions of Americans. If our goal in prohibiting marijuana 80 years ago was to make it disappear, I can tell you it has clearly failed. Of my 25 years in the state police, I spent 22 of them in narcotics, so I know I've been on the front lines for 22 years. To now think about your own experiences. If you personally haven't consumed marijuana at some point, it's almost guaranteed that you know someone who does, some loved one who does. Aside from failing to make the drug disappear, we have created an entirely new kinds of problems for communities, for law enforcement, and the justice system at large. Whether you approach marijuana reform from a racial justice angle, an economic angle, or a public health and safety angle, there's something in the Marijuana Justice Act for everyone. LEAP and I are excited to support such a comprehensive piece of legislation. I'd like to share now what I've learned in my experiences as state trooper, because that's where my understanding of this issue comes from. When I was a police officer, I noticed a destructive pattern emerging from our drug cases, most of which were for marijuana, possession, and nothing more. I noticed no matter how many times or how many arrests and charges I made for possession, there was always another unsuspecting young person for me to handcuff and take to the station. A young person who in all likelihood needed family support or counseling instead of punishment. I also noticed that no matter how many times arrests were made for selling marijuana, which was far fewer compared for the arrest than for possession, there was always another marijuana dealer ready to take his place. It was a job opportunity, a job opening. Sometimes these illegal maneuverings would result in even gunfire. and innocent people and good police officers are put in danger when the drug market has a profitable position to fill. It eventually became clear to me that a majority of problems were typically attributed to marijuana consumption are actually caused by prohibition. The Marijuana Justice Act will legalize the drug nationwide and make room for the states to regulate it for adult use without worrying about the federal government interfering. Dangerous criminals will be weakened financially as their product will be driven out of the market by inspection, licensed businesses. For too long, our approach has been focused on trying to stop a crime after it already has happened. What we must do, and what the Marijuana Justice Act does do, is help to prevent crime before it happens. We must abandon the outdated belief that marijuana can be eradicated by force. I know that firsthand. Or eradicated at all. Since it's here to stay, we have to make pragmatic choices on how we live with it by responsibly regulating it. This means sending health department to inspect greenhouses for mold and pesticides. It means sending undercover officers to dispensaries to make sure security is doing all the ID checks and not letting kids into the store. A drug dealer on the corner doesn't care how old that kid is. He'll sell to anybody. But in a regulated market, that's not going to happen. You can join this powerful growing movement today by telling your senators to support the Marijuana Justice Act and by learning about each of the organizations that are represented here today. Thanks again to Senator Booker and his staff for organizing this conference, and thank you for all your time.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant Bucci. I'm now very excited to bring up the leader from the NAACP, the administrative director. It is great that we have so many of our civil rights organizations who understand that this drug war has really been a war on people, and particularly poor and minority folks. Most people don't understand where we've gotten to in America. We started this nation with the sin of slavery that led right into the post-Reconstruction period, which was the greatest period of domestic terrorism in our country's history. Then after that, we had Jim Crow emerge, and then just as the Jim Crow laws were ending, came the onslaught of the drug war. Well, the drug war has so perniciously affected, insidiously affected communities of color that we now, in some ways, have come full circle. We now have more African Americans under criminal supervision than all the slaves in 1865. This is a profoundly unjust war that treats you better, as a great man named Brian Stevenson said, you often get better treatment in this country if you're rich and guilty than poor and innocent. And so I'm very happy to bring up Safir Qureshi, who's the administrative director of the NAACP. Safir?
Thank you very much. Thanks to Senator Booker for giving us the opportunity to participate in this historic event today. I'm here speaking on behalf of our state conference president, Mr. Richard Smith. He's recovering from surgery, so we're hoping he'll be back on his feet soon. I'm the administrative director for the NAACP New Jersey State Conference, and I bring you greetings on behalf of not only President Smith, but the officers in the executive committee and members of our 41 branches in the 21 counties in this great state of New Jersey. For 108 years, we've been at the forefront of in the fight for justice and equality. Simply put, legalizing marijuana in New Jersey is a civil rights issue. It is a national problem, but here in New Jersey, the problem is clear. African Americans are nearly 3 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana possession in New Jersey than a white person, despite the fact that the usage rates are practically the same. Hillary O. Shelton, Vice President of Advocacy for the NAACP Washington Bureau, said, "These numbers make legislation a civil rights issue. We are usually conservative in terms of these issues that we support, but disproportionate prosecution of African Americans for drug-related offenses for marijuana has called us to fight for legislation in our community. If the laws on drug possession were being enforced correctly, then the number of arrests, prosecutions, and prison sentences would be proportionate to society across the board. However, sadly, that is not the case. The NAACP's stand in support of legislation of marijuana supports one of our founding principles, What the NAACP New Jersey State Conference is trying to do is simply what is rooted in our mission: to eliminate racial prejudice wherever it may be. If members of our own community and our elected officials are able to see this as not just a drug issue, but as a civil rights issue, I believe even more individuals across this great state, and now because of Senator Booker's efforts across this great country, will agree that it's time to legalize, tax, and regulate marijuana. The NAACP is not encouraging marijuana use. Let us not get it confused. Marijuana is not healthy for all people, and particularly young people. But our current system gives too much access to young people to marijuana. We need to move marijuana and marijuana dealers off of the corners and put it behind the counters where it can be regulated. So we are proud to be here today with this diverse group of individuals and organizations. From the very beginning, we have stood with New Jersey United for Marijuana Reform. This group defies expectations. We are law enforcement, civil rights, medical, religious, and criminal justice reform organizations and individuals. We are New Jerseyans, and we all stand united in support of reforming our state's and now our country's marijuana laws. And make no mistake, we are growing. Drug Policy Alliance, as well, has launched their campaign working hard to right the wrongs of this failed war on drugs, and we too stand in solidarity with them. Let me give you a little history. The get tough approach to crime that has began in the Nixon administration and intensified with Ronald Reagan's declaration of the war on drugs has devastated Black America. Across this country, 2.6 million people are behind bars. 4.8 million others are on probation or parole, to say nothing of the millions more whose criminal records stigmatize them for life. Marijuana prohibition is an important piece of that picture. The war on marijuana has failed, and this failure has had devastating impact on Black families. The extraordinary phenomenon has opened the eyes of many across this state and our country, and has made the majority agree that legalizing, taxing, and regulating marijuana is an important piece of fixing our state and country's addiction to the use of using the criminal justice system to deal with our problems. In 2010, right here in New Jersey, our government wasted more than $127 million on criminal justice costs enforcing marijuana possession laws. Imagine what could have been done with those resources. Legalization, taxation, and regulation of marijuana for adults is the right choice for this state, and Senator Booker, it is the right choice for our country. The NAACP supports this approach, but we will keep a watchful eye on those resources to ensure that when New Jersey moves forward to legalize and tax marijuana, and I'm confident that it will, that there will be a reinvestment in those communities that have been devastated by this failed system. Senator, marijuana legislation must be fair and it must be equitable. There must be investments in the creation of jobs, job training programs, funding a broken education system, and a commitment to public safety, drug prevention, and drug treatment programs. We now know that well-resourced and evidence-based educational programs are the solution to the drug problems we experience today. It must include policies that provide automatic and retroactive expungement, access to the industry for individuals with prior convictions and those from different socioeconomic backgrounds, the creation of civil penalties for those who operate outside the legal market so as not to perpetuate racial disparities within the criminal justice system, and reinvest of the revenue generated into those communities that have been most harmed by marijuana prohibition. Without these elements, the wrong legislation would further perpetuate our state's and country's racial disparities and would do nothing to help the communities of color who have suffered under the racist policy of marijuana prohibition. We are confident, Senator, that with your leadership we will be able to address and repair the decades of harm inflicted on communities of color. To be clear, our community will not be the poster child as to why this legislation must take place in New Jersey and across this great nation, but when the savings and revenue materialize, we are ignored or moved to the side. We must move towards a safe, legal, regulated marijuana system, but we must do it in the right way. This change has the potential to create thousands of sustainable, well-paying jobs in agriculture, manufacturing, health and safety, retail, regulators, and other sectors. These opportunities must not only become available to those who have significant capital or major investments to bring to the table, but we must make sure that employment and small business opportunities become available to all communities, especially those disproportionately impacted by the enforcement of our marijuana laws. So for the few years, today, and moving forward, the NAACP has worked and will work diligently as a part of this effort to educate New Jersey, this nation, New Jerseyans about how the status quo has failed our communities, especially black communities. New Jersey, this nation must legalize, tax, and regulate marijuana and end the harms caused by our current laws, create jobs, increase public safety, and generate revenue that will help us all. It's time to end prohibition again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, so we'll bring forward the councilwoman now. Sorry we missed you earlier. Forgive me.
Linden Mayor Armstead had a well-deserved pre-planned trip today, so unfortunately he could not be here. In a prepared statement, the mayor wishes to express the following. I support this legislation. As a public service and proud family man, I have always been concerned with our children and the community at large concerning drug policies. In turn, it is crucial to keep in mind the 1 to 3 significant impact that the current policy has had on specific demographics of our population. Medical study in hand with scientific research has led states, including New Jersey, towards the development of laws that reflect the movement of understanding. I believe in second chances. Our nation believes in second chances. To this end, Senator Cory Booker's landmark legislation will offer our Linden minor offenders a chance of employment, education, and thereby productively reestablishing themselves as law-abiding members of their respective communities. I thank Senator Booker. I thank Linden community for understanding second chances and decency. And finally, I thank Councilwoman Michelle Yamakaitis for expressing my support.
That's you.
Yes, that's me. And this is Mayor Derek Armstead, close quotes.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Thank you, Councilwoman, very, very much. So I want to just take a moment now to answer any questions with the press understanding with some mercy that there's a lot of us standing out here in the heat, so we'll make them quick. On topic only. I'll do off topic on the side.
Absolutely.
Okay.
On topic then, given the fact the Trump administration is in charge and they've made their feelings on marijuana known very clearly, how practical do you think it is that there are going to be quick action on this?
So given the fact that the Trump administration is in charge, makes this legislation even more urgent. There must be a response to the Donald Trump putting in Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who has decided not only to continue federal law, but to actually double down on it and actually put in threat and in peril through the words he's putting out there already, states that have already legalized medical marijuana, not to mention states that have legalized marijuana. So think about this right now. Jeff Sessions is pushing this idea that we in law-abiding states, whether it's New Jersey with medical marijuana, Colorado with marijuana prohibition ended entirely, that those law-abiding citizens, small business people, veterans who are getting their important medication, that the federal government can come in and arrest them all. And so more than ever, we need a response to that kind of policy. And that's yet another reason why this is urgent. And let me just say right now, I don't care who's in office. The time is always right. Now is always the right time to do what is right. And so I am calling on my fellow congresspeople and senators to join me in this legislation.
Senator, our viewers aren't concerned about the ins and outs of the bill. They want to know if this means that they can do doobie on the streets without getting arrested. What does it mean for the everyday person? Can they just, smoke a blunt in the streets without worrying about being arrested?
Despite the way you necessarily phrase that question, well, again, the reality is simply this. In the same way with alcohol, marijuana, frankly, fast food, which I just saw some recent medical reports, that stuff will kill you. We need to be acting responsible as adults. And I don't endorse in any way the irresponsible use of marijuana. That's outrageous. But I do believe that we have come to a point in our society where we need to end prohibition. And we need to have taxed, regulated marijuana within American communities, especially understanding that the way this law is going about, the way people are being persecuted under this law, has less to do with their usage of marijuana and more to do with their socioeconomic status, with their background, with their race. And so this is a fight, and you're seeing it now on the state level, you're seeing it on the federal level, that we're pushing to bring justice back to our criminal justice system. Yes? Yeah, but the data, her question was, is marijuana a gateway drug? And what we're finding out through a lot of the research is it's actually an off-ramp drug. Helping people, number one, have an off-ramp from drug addiction, from PTSD, from diseases like Dravet syndrome. This is a substance that has been proven to be able to help people with crises. And the fact that we literally are putting constraints on doing research on the drug by having it scheduled now as a Schedule I drug, it undermines our ability to even research the drug to see about possible beneficial applications. So I do not believe marijuana is a gateway drug. And having been a mayor who's trying to keep my community safe, if there's any drug that is driving violence more than marijuana, it's alcohol, which is legal. And so I just don't think that this is a gateway drug. And by the way, if you regulate it, you're actually going to overcome a lot of problems with people having to go to the street to buy their drug. You know how dangerous that is, what it might be laced with, that it's not regulated, we don't know what's in it. And so if we're really about public safety in the United States of America, then we're going to regulate this drug, we're going to tax this drug, use that revenue to invest in things that keep people safe and empower people. But I do not want to let a very important part of this legislation to go afield. It's also about reinvesting in communities that have been so harmed by prohibition, that have been so devastated for decades now. When a family member is arrested that has children, that they've been saddled now with a criminal conviction for doing things that legislators and senators and presidents have gotten away scot-free with doing, it tears apart that family, it drives their economic well-being into the ground, and undermines the whole community around them. And that's why the reinvestment part of this bill is so important.
Senator, last question. Last question.
I'm going to go last question here, just because ladies first, and then I'm going to disobey my staff, which is a reckless thing to do, and I'll let you have the last question, sir.
Senator, so Republicans have the majority in the House and the Senate. In order for this to...
Are you sure about that? Have you fact-checked that?
So have you heard from any... Is there any opportunity here for bipartisanship? Have you heard from any Republicans who said that they would support this bill?
So a couple things. Remember that the last piece of legislation I did on marijuana, the CARES Act, focusing on the outrageous threat that the federal government can go arrest people in medically marijuana safe states and arrest them. That bill got bipartisan support. That marijuana bill got bipartisan support, a number of Republican senators. I have not started fighting to try to get convince twist arms. There was a small thing called healthcare that we've been dealing with this last week or two. So when I come back from this recess, I will start working. But I was surprised that Republican senators pulled me aside, a number of them. One on the Senate floor, very conservative Republican who I will not out, stood with me and said, I think it is such an injustice in our country. And he used a college student. He said it's such an injustice to take a college student who's got so much promising career and then to arrest them, putting in danger their scholarships and the like, just because they got caught with a little bit of marijuana. I, of course, retorted to him, yes, it's unjust for a college student, but it's also unjust for a guy who lives in an inner city who is working in a factory or a warehouse as well. And so I know that the basic fairness issue is understood on both sides of the aisle. It gives me lots of confidence. In fact, I can declare unequivocally that this legislation, it's not a matter of if it will pass, it's a matter of when it will pass and we will end prohibition. So last question.
It's notoriously hard for the marijuana reform community to engage
Sir, well, this is an issue about all of us who are activists and progressives and the urgency to make sure our movements are inclusive. I find this with the environmental movement all the time. And the people in New Jersey most impacted by environmental injustices are usually low-income communities, are usually communities of color as well. And we've got to find a way to create activism that really is a larger, to take the mantra of a man before me, that really is a rainbow coalition. We're a nation that has a common pain, but we seem to be losing our common sense of purpose. And so whether it's young people in Appalachia or young people in Camden, New Jersey, who are being persecuted because they're poor, we need to start understanding that this needs to be a multicultural movement, and we're all united in this. What folks are doing, unfortunately, who are defenders of the status quo, is they're exploiting our divisiveness, and they're trying to drive wedge issues between us to make us believe we don't have a common sense of purpose. And so I want you to understand that racial justice is not about justice for people who are black or brown. Racial justice is about American justice. Justice for LGBT Americans is not about gay and lesbian justice, it's about American justice. Equality for women isn't about women, it's about the United States equality. And we're not going to win the big fights in this country until we understand that we're all in this together, and you cannot suppress an inner city African-American girl without yourself being suppressed. You can't enjoy justice anywhere in this country until we make sure there's justice everywhere in this country. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.